Do you have babies crawling out of the woodwork? Are they just getting into everything? Does your current baby gate look like something used in Hurricane Katrina? I'm going to teach you how to build this. Let's get started. So I'm using 2x8s that I had laying around. I'm measuring 5 feet and then I'm going to cut them and rip them down to 4 inches wide so that I can make a nice border out of that. These boards are slightly longer than 10 feet, so I'm going to cut them down to 5-foot sections so I can use 5 foot on the top and the bottom. Since these are 2x8s, I got to rip them down to 4 inches wide. Now, if you just want to use 2x4s and go with that, no issue there. I just had the 2x8s laying around. So I'm going to be ripping the long pieces for the top and bottom, and the side pieces for the left and right side. So now I'm going to lower the table saw blade so that it's 1/4 inch above the top so that I can run a channel down the middle of the boards to put the plywood in. I don't have a dado blade, so it's going to take a few passes to get this to be 1/4 inch wide. And then when you're doing the top and bottom, you don't want to start at the very edge. You want to drop it in like 2 or 3 inches in so that you have a nice end piece without the cut line in the middle. Now I just need to trim down the piece of plywood that I had. Everything that I'm using in this project was stuff I had laying around. So if you were to do this from scratch, it would be a sheet of plywood and a couple 2x4s. Now I'm just dry fitting them all together to make sure that everything fits into place and make sure that no adjustments need to be made. It also helps to do this on the floor so that you don't drop it like that. So everything fit together. I did have to make some adjustments, run it back through the table saw and cut the channel in the middle a little bit more and trim up the side pieces just a little bit to make sure that they fit the sheet of plywood that I had. Once I knew everything fit together, I started drilling some pocket holes to tighten it all up and secure it. I did 2 pocket holes per corner, and then I used 4-inch deck screws to tie the corners together. So while you're doing this, you want to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly before you start drilling the holes. It might take a hammer and a little tapping after you move it around to get it lined up, but no big deal there. And if you want, you can do some wood glue as well along that center channel where the plywood is to give it a little bit of a better grip. So after I got the bottom assembled, I made sure that it fit in the opening perfectly, and then I started sanding down all the pieces to get them ready for paint. Now at this point you can use your creativity. I'm just going plain white on the paint. You can stain the wood, paint it, do whatever designs you want to. We're going to end up doing a herringbone pattern on the plywood and then painting the back of it white. So with everything, I just went through and sprayed a light coat of spray primer on all the wood to give the paint something to adhere to a little better as opposed to just the wood. So the lines on my herringbone pattern are going to be gray. So I started with a gray base coat across the entire piece of plywood. And then I'm going to end up taping and painting white over the rest of it. So here I'm finding the center mark, and then I'm going to start taping the herringbone pattern using a 45-degree angle with my square, and then taking the tape from that corner and running it down along that line. So I wanted the pattern to be 4 inches apart. So I used the square on the top of the pattern and then moved it to the bottom, and then just used the tape to get that 4-inch apart. So for the top of this pattern, I did, again, 4 inches and made the boards going the opposite direction to create that herringbone. Then once I was done taping, I took a knife and cut off the excess tape so I had nice crisp lines for the herringbone all across. Once I was done with the tape, painted white, going with the pattern of the herringbone. I let it dry for about 15-20 minutes and then I started pulling up the tape because I didn't want that to get stuck to the paint. Now be careful when you're pulling it up in this pattern because the rest of the connected parts will pull up. I then started painting all the border pieces and then painted the back of the plywood white. Once all the paint had dried, we slid the plywood into the 3/4 frame, made sure everything was fitting properly, and then dropped the top up on top. Once the top was on, I laid it down and secured it with the screws through the pocket holes I had drilled earlier. It's time to add the wheels. I went about 7 inches from the inside of each side, marked the holes, then drilled them out and screwed them down. Alright, now it's time to create the guides that will keep the top of the gate from tipping over and help it slide nicely along the wall. So I just used some 1x6s I had laying around, screwed them together, and I was going to do it as just one piece, but I put it up, I didn't like the look of it, so I ended up cutting it into 3 separate parts and spreading them out along the whole track of the door. And painted them white and ended up securing them to the wall with the same 4-inch screws I used with the pocket holes. If you guys like seeing videos like this and learning how to do some really fun projects, hit that subscribe button to see everything we've got coming out next. Let's see how this works.